Hi everyone, my name is Erica Wood and I'm from the Hopkins County Extension Office and I'm back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking to you all about this lovely plant specimen here, and it is known as the Norfolk Island Pine Tree. So this is a plant that we commonly see now in our garden centers and our big box stores because it just makes a really great little Christmas tree to have in your home. So let's talk a little bit more about that and also give some care tips to keep it alive. So just to get started, the name Norfolk Island Pine is kind of a deceiving name. So it's not a true pine species. And in fact, this plant actually originates out in the Pacific on these small islands, one of them being Norfolk Island, as you can imagine from its name, which is centered, near Australia and New Zealand, and where you'll see these plants growing really up to 200 feet tall along seaside cliffs and in the more temperate rainforests there. And it actually is a really lovely tree to see in person, with a very lovely conical shape appearance. And what's interesting is the foliage starts out needle-like. So it definitely has, kind of that look of more evergreen foliage that we see a lot with our actual pine trees. But the foliage will actually become more scale-like as it matures and age. So the leaf structure will kind of change over time. Now, with this plant, the other thing to note too, with differences between it and an actual pine tree is, of course, we have a lot of pines that grow here in Kentucky and they're hardy with our winters. This is not a hardy plant. It really can't survive our winters at all. And really, if our nighttime temperatures especially drop below 50 degrees, it may experience some cold damage. And so in that regard, we actually treat this more as an indoor plant, as a house plant. Now, it's not to say that, you can definitely bring it out during the summer months, but come fall, you'll definitely have to bring it in before danger of frost occurs, just so, it doesn't get damaged when it gets too cold. So just something to keep in mind there. So when you're growing it as a house plant, it's not going to get quite as tall as it does in the wild. This is actually a very slow grower. It's only going to really grow a couple inches for you every year. And most of the time, they're not going to get really taller than 6 to 8 feet in a house. And if they do get taller than that, then you may run out of space, especially depending on, where your ceiling height is. So now, of course, if you have like a big sunroom or even a greenhouse, it may get larger than that. But typically, these are going to be very slow growing in your actual house. So when it comes to keeping them in your house, you're really going to want to give them a very bright sunlight, okay? They can tolerate low light conditions for a period of time, but they're not going to thrive long term, and they're going to decline actually. And so if you can put it in a more brighter, warmer window, so something like a south or west facing window as opposed to north or east facing, that's going to be better for it, okay? So, the brighter the light, the better it's going to do in your home, and it's also going to produce more growth for you in those brighter conditions. Now, I will make this comment. Just because it can tolerate really bright light indoors doesn't mean it can do the same outdoors. So if you bring this outside during the summer months, you'll want to put it on a shaded deck or patio. We have some really scorching hot summers here in Kentucky, and so it's really not going to be able to take that afternoon heat here and that bright warm sun. And so you'll want to keep it shaded and protected from those direct rays. Otherwise, it's going to be burnt to a crisp outside. So just something important there. Now, when it comes to other things like watering, just with other houseplants, you're going to water it whenever it starts to feel dry to the touch. So put like your pinky finger down in the soil and go down a couple inches, and if it feels dry, you're going to water it. If it feels wet, you just leave it alone, okay? Pretty simple and easy. When it comes to Other things like humidity. This plant actually does very well in more humidity. It loves humidity, okay? So if you're able to increase your humidity in your house to over 50%, it's gonna thrive better for you. And that can be a struggle because especially as we get into the winter months, our humidity in our homes, because our heat's constantly running and drying that air out, might only be between 20 to 30%. So, if you have a way to increase the humidity, such as a humidifier, maybe setting out a tray of pebbles and filling that up with water next to the plant, grouping plants together, those sorts of things can help to increase the humidity and help this plant to thrive a little better. Or even if you have a kitchen or a bathroom space that has a nice bright window that you could place the plant in, would also be ideal because those rooms are naturally more humid than other rooms in our house. Something else to note, because it likes that humidity, it likes that moisture, avoid putting it near an air vent because if it's right there, when the heat's constantly running, it's definitely going to struggle. So just something to keep in mind there. Now, when it comes to, we've talked about light, we've talked about watering, we've talked about humidity. Let's talk a little bit about some common issues we might see. The most common is going to be, browning branches, okay? Dead browning branches, like especially at the bottom, it can be very common for this plant. And like I know this one right here has some right here that are dying. So the big thing with this, like what could be causing this? Well, it could be a number of things. And so it's almost like you have to diagnose and try to problem solve what issue it actually is. So the drying leaves at the bottom could be due to low humidity. It could be that it's not getting enough humidity. It could be from inconsistent watering. That could be from either underwatering, it's not getting enough, or even overwatering to the point where you may be getting some root rot issues and it's dropping its branches because of that. Some other things it could also be things like too much fertilizer or this fertilizer or salt buildup in the soil. And that's why it's always good if you have it in some kind of container, make sure it has a drainage hole. And when you water deeply to allow all that excess water to leach out at the bottom of that drainage hole, and that will also help to leach out any excess fertilizer or salt to prevent buildup that could potentially harm the root system of this plant. So just something to keep in mind there. So for the most part, this leaf drop is the more common thing that you're gonna see. So, if you start to see that with this plant, just try to, figure out, could it be a watering issue? Could it be a humidity? Could it be a fertilizer issue? Just kind of, try to problem solve and figure out what it could be. And it could be some multiple factors too. And one thing I'll mention as well is, if you just brought this plant into your home, it may also take some time for it to acclimate to your new home. After all, it went from probably a greenhouse to a garden center to now your home. It's going to take some time to adjust, and it's also going to go into this kind of little shock period where it may drop some branches as a result of stress. So some other issues to keep in mind too, this isn't really prone to a whole lot of like pests or diseases. You will want to watch root rot just as you would with any number of house plants. And then sometimes you may have issues with something like spider mites, where the spider mite population may get out of control and you start to see the webbing on there. So just kind of be mindful and be monitoring for those pests and diseases. But for the most part, it's a pretty resilient plant in that regard. When it comes to anything else, pruning, you don't need to prune except when you're pruning out these dead or diseased little limbs on it. Otherwise, just leave it alone and it's gonna hopefully thrive for you. when it comes to using it as a Christmas tree, that's probably the most important thing, right? So, you know, you can actually put ornaments on this tree. I would definitely recommend putting more lighter weight or smaller ornaments that aren't too heavy, just so it's not breaking off the branches to this tree. You can put tinsel or like a string of lights around it. Make sure that the string of lights aren't like emitting, too much warmth. Maybe go with something, some kind of light like a type of LED that does not emit heat. So that's also something important to note. And then of course after the holiday season, remove all of those decorations just to help it to photosynthesize properly so that its leaves aren't blocked by way of those ornaments or light. So and really, when you're thinking about it from a sustainability standpoint, if you wanted to use this as an alternative to another Christmas tree, that is a great approach, because this is something you can keep all year round as a house plant. And then if you keep it the next year, you can decorate it again as your Christmas tree for next year. So it's a great option as opposed to buying a cut tree every year that you're just going to have to dispose of or compost, or even avoiding buying something like a plastic tree that, even though you do use that over and over again, it is made of plastic, which is not biodegradable. So this might be a good option for you, especially if you're trying to be like a little bit more environmentally conscious and you just want to try to keep growing something that you're going to be able to enjoy for years to come. So really great little Christmas tree for that, for sure. Well, I think that'll about do it for this video. Thank you all so much for listening in on this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.